Manoj, thank you very much for a very powerful reality check on the ground. Your examples of community-based mobilization as a lever of inclusion is very interesting, very practical, and punctuated by examples how different actors were brought together, including the politicians. And 3Gs will stick in my mind. So thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes panel presentation, and we are now moving to a discussion phase. And as I said, regrettably, I have to leave you, so I pass on to Robert, asking him to chair the discussion and then to conclude the morning. Robert, over to you.
We have 30 minutes to do that. We have 30 minutes to do that. So this is the opportunity that you have. And we are going to request you, because I can see there are going to be a lot of questions. Please just summarize. Don't make another presentation. Just summarize your question and just ask what you want or give a comment. It doesn't have to be a question. Okay, the first hand was there. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I was thinking to ask Professor Friedman that I was very impressed about this cash transfer, and I was thinking that there are several, frontline farmers, for example, the coastal farmers of Bangladesh, or sorry, is it clear now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was actually wanted to ask a question about this cash transfer that you mentioned. And, several frontline farmers, for example, the coastal farmers of Bangladesh, or, Himalayan frontline farmers of Nepal, would it be, can we think of some kind of trade-off between, because they are also encroaching the natural resources for food, for their livelihood, and whether we could think of a kind of trade-off of food for ecosystem management, so that, ecosystem, their livelihood can also be, sustained for managing, natural resource in this kind of, situation. Thank you.
Okay, great. Wait, we receive a few more questions. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Beena Agarwal. I had actually one comment and one question. The question is very brief. It is, firstly, thank you for these really excellent presentations, and we learned a great deal. Question is to Manoj Kumar, which is that how did you bring about, since it's not just women who cultivate, you have small farms, how did you enable them to move from commercial cultivation to more subsistence oriented? And you can grow subsistence crops, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to use it for home nutrition. So there are several linkages there, which if you could elaborate on. My comment is really, first of all, it's very good that there are three elements here. Cheryl talked about the importance of gender, and so did Manoj. And Harriet reminded us of the issue of sustainability, and all three are very important, and the small farmer. Now, what I wanted to put here is a complementary approach on governance. And here I suppose I have some difference between the issue of conditional cash transfer, which is really typically goes to individual farmers. It seems to me on the question of sustainability, many of the problems we're talking about, depleting soils, water, and so on, are community problems. And it's not something that individual small farmers, certainly not in much of Africa and South Asia, can actually take up. And what you need is a group-oriented approach. People have talked in this conference, rainwater harvesting systems and elsewhere, soil replenishment strategies also require community approaches. And it seems to me individual-oriented will not necessarily solve it. The second is to, and very briefly, share with you that given, and this is something, since it's evidence-based, I draw on evidence on research that I've done and some other people have done, is the importance of trying to think that if you have a lot of very small farmers, they could be women farmers, they could be male farmers, why a leap could be to try and see if we can have much more group-oriented approaches to, one, investment, which is even individual investment. You want irrigation, groups of 10 farmers could do it much better than individual farmers. And secondly, a pooling of land. Now, this is, I'm talking bottom-up, voluntary, participatory, and not these sort of old socialist experiments or top-down, which were often disastrous. And there are examples of success stories, both from India and the transition economies. In India, for instance, the Deccan Development Society in Andhra Pradesh has been doing it from 1989, where groups of women farmers have been leasing in land or have jointly purchased land through state schemes and have been doing farming, 8 or 10 women, not a large number, doing organic farming in rain-fed areas with multiple cropping, sometimes growing up to 24 crops. But this is not just in the 20, 30, 50 villages. In fact, the UNDP and the Government of India launched a big program in 2002 where 50,000 women farmers across 3 states of India, and many of them are still doing it.
Okay.
The second example, and I'll just flag it, is that in Nicaragua, in East Germany, in Kyrgyzstan, in Romania, after decollectivization, people, rather than going for individual family farming, actually decided to form new small groups, and they were found to be much more productive. And I'm not talking about labor productivity, it's land productivity, because in our part of the world it's land productivity which matters, than individual family farming. I have also written about, in case people want the evidence, in a paper called Rethinking Collectivities, but this is, and I'm happy to give copies, but the idea was not to flag my own work, but just to put this on the table. In Bangladesh also, BRAC has been doing this, which is groups of women leasing in land. And I'm sure there are examples if we look for it. Other examples elsewhere in the world.
Okay, we go behind JJ.
Thank you. Quickly, really I want to concur that the panelists has made very exciting presentations which has set the stage. I would like to say, I hope we understand, we have got a common understanding of what governance is and inclusiveness. Now, so far, it appears governance has been limited to the public sector or governments. But I would like to say governance applies to government, both central and local, to legislators, institutions, to corporate private sector institutions, civil society institution, traditional institution, farmers organization, co-ops institution, academic institution, consumers organization, labor union, women, youth institution. All this, if they don't have their governance in place, working with them become impossible. And therefore, what we need to do is to emphasize that when we talk of governance, it applies to all these levels. And in that case, then, it becomes necessary to identify, are they well organized? Are they capacity built? Are they committed? In my own organization, Farmers Uganda Agricultural Council, our motto is that the future belongs to the organized, empowered, and committed. Outside that, you're stuck.
Okay.
So I would like to make a contribution that governance should be reflected at all these levels.
Okay, panel, do you want first to respond to those before we take another set?
I'll put the two together. I don't, everyone would have to work out how to incentivize, that's a horrible word, sorry, how to create incentives for people to move in the right direction. And that, of course, depends on where they're starting from. I'm more inclined to the idea of community and collective organizations, cooperatives, and so on. And from where I come from in Canada, where farming is mostly highly commercial, the formation of cooperatives and of alliances, especially with environmental officials across public-private nonprofit divides to manage waterways is absolutely crucial. I mean, you can't do it on your own. So it really is about a target, a place to try to get where people are working together, where markets are embedded in healthy ecosystems, inclusive social relations, and then how to get there depends on where you're starting. And this was suggested as one, the CCT idea was suggested as one policy instrument that's already in place and often in favor that might actually be used, but there's no reason it can't be used in any number of ways, including collectively. But definitely land use has to be organized at a community and an ecosystem level in nested and scaled ways up to the biosphere.
Great. Yeah, Kumar?
I'll respond specifically on the women inclusion part and decision making and moving from the cash crop to the subsistence possible. Firstly, one of the realizations that we had when we work with small farmer groups is that one group is the 20,000 farmers in Araku in Vishakhapatnam in AP. The rest are actually in arid lands farmer groups of 300 to 150, and in very rare case up to 500, and those are some 300 odd such farmer groups. The realization we had, particularly in the indigenous people group and as well as in all small farming community groups, is that actually in the farm, it's the women who work more than the men. And therefore, we just have an assumption that when we say small farmer, it's the men. More often, they end up having the land title. If there is a land title, the men end up having it. Or if there is a cash transfer happening, it comes in the men's name. So that's the whole male bastion angle there. But typically, when we actually work with the community, our first point of contact and for the dissemination is actually in most cases the women farmers who end up being a help to the male farmer who owns the land. So the inclusion levers that we had to do had mechanisms built in, like saying that the land title have to be co-shared. Because in many cases, these were landless farmers whom we gave land title from the government on a long lease basis. So we had to ensure that the title was with the women as well, if not only with them. We had to also say that we will ensure that the produce marketed through us, the money that will come in, will ideally come into a joint bank account. And we would have discussions with women and men on how do we spend the money and what is the fiscal discipline about the income and how do we ensure that we have the right selection of the crops. So this was an uphill, tedious process, which I didn't highlight in the 10 minutes that I was given, but that resulted in the space for discussing the lack of the 3Gs. And we did not supplant the cash crops. We entered into an agreement that we will diversify to include these short gestation greens and grains. At the same time, we still could not convince, despite all this, and then we had to pull the levers with the government and come out with incentives, to use the bad word, but incentives of a different kind. And those who are familiar with India, we have the largest equivalent of right to work program where you get a guaranteed minimum wage for a certain number of days called the National Rural Employment Guarantee Assurance Scheme. So we even linked that scheme for these women farmers, telling that if they were to grow the grains and grams instead of cash crops or over and above cash crops, they'll be eligible for these wages as additional income. So a combination of economics and empowerment had to be built in, pretty much like the way Deccan Development Society probably did it, to make that inclusion happen. I hope that's the answer.
Okay, we can take another set. Yes, behind there and then Kachita and then down there. Okay, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophia Upriti from Nepal. And my question is for Cheryl. It was very interesting to hear that in Nigeria, nutrition has been positioned in national development policy framework. So if you would be able to share what were the processes involved and what was the result of that. Thank you.
Pass it to the gentleman with.
Thank you. Once again from Nepal. Janardhan Nepal from Ministry of Education. Yes, all the presentation were. Presentation was very important and very enlightening. Yeah, I have some queries to Madam Harriet. I mean, you have highlighted that the incentives provided to the farmers as a producer and the market linked to that could help very much in production and also to help the farming community or females, whoever, to find the fund to buy the food. My query is, how the subsidy pattern, the incentive is making difference in our world. I mean, South Asia, if you see, the subsidy for farming is provided to chemical fertilizer, insecticide, pesticide, and some other things, which are mostly captured by the elites. The farmers, the actual tenants, do not have land, so that how they can use that subsidy. So that because of the subsidy, the farmers are even, being more poorer than they were before. And at the same time, the market is also not responding as their need. For instance, you can see that they produce a lot of dairy products, for instance, the milk, the perishable vegetables. But what happens, the brokers who buys from them, and the consumers is also paying more, and the producer is not receiving the actual fund, price they have to receive. So the broker is making the money, and they are selling their products in very little price, which doesn't help even their subsistence. That is something happening. So I want to request you that how the subsidy and the incentive policy help the farmers to grow more, and at the same time the pricing policy that help marketing their foods, their products, so that they have money to help their feed their children and the family.
Okay.
That is something we have to bring in.
Thank you very much.